Jacob Wetterling and Nathan Breeze have a spiritual warning for their homelands, Australia and the USA. Can you guess what it is?
This is Richard with Graham Richardson.
Well, welcome to Rich Over this week. It's going to be a great show. I've got Mark Morey, the boss of Unions New South Wales, with me tonight. We're going to ask him why union numbers continue to decline, how do they arrest the decline, and is there a relevance for trade unions in the modern era? He can answer all those questions. I'd rather him do it than me. Not easy these days. As well as that, of course, Keith Suter. I haven't had him on for about 6 weeks or so, but Keith's always brilliant on international affairs, and there's so many things happening internationally that it's worth having a look at. All that having been said, I watched Question Time today. Now, I know you might say that's an example of someone who doesn't have a life, but I was watching Question Time, and a couple of things struck me that I think are worth noting. There's no question that Malcolm Turnbull is on a roll. At least he thinks he is. There's no doubt in the world that he's performing much better than he has in Question Time since he became Prime Minister. I thought it was one of his better performances today. I mightn't have agreed with what he said. It's just that he said some nonsensical things really well. And he put them forcefully. And I think his troops are reacting. He and Scott Morrison obviously believe that their version of the budget is doing somewhat better than that of Bill Shorten and Chris Bowen. I'm not sure they're right, but they're certainly able to assert it, and assert it very well indeed. They looked the goods today in Question Time. But it wasn't that worried me. There's a federal conference of the Labor Party coming up, and there's one issue that is going to be huge at that conference, as it was at the last federal conference, and that is the question of refugees, of what happens with those who've been stuck on Manus Island and Nauru for some years, and it looked like being stuck there for a lot of years more because there's just nowhere for them to go in a world crowded with millions upon millions of refugees. They're very hard to place. One thing is for certain. You go into any pub, or you go into a coffee shop and you listen to the conversations, unless you're in a coffee shop in the inner city, anywhere else in Australia, anywhere in the suburbs and the towns and the villages, they all say they don't want any more boat people, and if you let those people back in, it's just an invitation, an open invitation to the smugglers to get into it again, for the boats to start coming. And of course, if you remember back, the reason that I lost heart on the whole Kevin Rudd pro-refugee push was when I watched that boat break up on Christmas Island and I watched people die in front of me. And then you think there's more than 1,000 dead trying to get to Australia. I wouldn't like to have that on my conscience, and I don't want any more. However, if you listen to Jed Carney, who won Batman in spectacular fashion, former president of the ACTU, she's going to make getting those refugees back here her main priority. I mean, she says resettling them, but there's no way that they're going to be resettled. The United States has shown that while it promised to take a whole heap, it's very, very few that they've actually let in. Their vetting processes are stopping so many. And so we all have to wonder about this whole question and where it goes politically for us. Now, for the Labor Party, I watched Peter Dutton today. Now, Peter Dutton is a fairly blunt sort of character. In private, he's very different to the gruff, tough image that he portrays publicly. But he gave an answer today which I think showed up how difficult things are going to be for Labor on this question. He just hoed into Susan Lamb, who of course is no longer sitting there. She's one of the ones who fell foul of the High Court on the dual citizenship rules. And because she's running in the by-election for Longman, whenever it may be held, and by the way, that may happen sooner rather than later now, because finally the Liberals pre-selected a candidate, which means they must now be satisfied that this bloke has sorted out his citizenship problems. That's why we've had the delay. So that must have been sorted. So I think you'll probably find tomorrow or the day after they'll announce a date in July for those by-elections. Now, I really worry about that, because when you get onto this boat question, and I can understand the humanitarian feelings, I mean, what would it be like to be stuck on places like Nauru for years? There's nothing on Nauru. It's just a barren piece of earth in the middle of the ocean. It's not one of those, it's not Tahiti, it's not New Caledonia, there's no beautiful places on Nauru. Nauru's just an awful place. And that's where we've stuck these people. Now, at least they're not getting shot at, they're not part of a war, they're not getting killed, but it is a pretty horrendous life to just stay there forever in a land that is so totally alien to them. So I can understand all those humanitarian reasons why people are saying we've got to get them off there, if we have to resettle them here, so be it. But a great majority of Australians don't agree with that. A huge majority. And you do have to think about that carefully. You can't just say to the great majority of Australians, I know better than you. It's like the Labor Party, some people in it at any rate, would like to pass a vote of no confidence in the electorate. It doesn't work that way. The electorate posts votes of confidence or no confidence at elections. And if Labor choose to go down that path that they dallied with at the last federal conference, a great speech from Richard Marles, who was then the immigration spokesman, helped bring things back to an even keel. And Anthony Albanese also, I think, didn't go as hard as he could have. And that meant that the Labor Party came up with a policy that it could live with. If that same thing doesn't happen again, if we go down a pro-refugee path, one thing is for certain for the Labor Party, it means defeat. There's no question in my mind. I watched Dutton today, and there's a relish in the way they talk about this because they know what people say. It's not just focus groups and polling. You don't need that. Walk down the street, people come up to you and talk about it. And that's why Tony Abbott, when he talks about lowering immigration, isn't way off the beat. There's an awful lot of Australians agree with him. And we ought to be very careful about this debate. It's a public debate that's worth having. But one thing's for certain in the Labor Party, if you go too far in this one, you guarantee defeat. And I think watching the Liberals today, watching Turnbull and watching Dutton, they've got a hint of that. They can see light at the end of what has been for them a very dark tunnel. That having been said,
Graham Richardson knows about suffering ever since he had his major operation, which he survived miraculously because he wanted to live to see his kid grow up. So he knows about human suffering, and he does have empathy for the people on Nauru who are stuck on that place. But it would seem that a lot of Australians, and from what Graham said, the majority, the vast majority, he said, or Australians do not. They do not have empathy. They are willing to let those people stay there and suffer indefinitely. And that is cruelty. Jake and Nathan have 5 words for Australia and the USA, in particular for Peter Dutton and Donald Trump. And those words are mental torture and bad karma. No, you can't turn around to a majority of any country and say, I know better than you, I know what we should do. A Jew in Nazi Germany could not have stood up to Hitler and all of his men and all of his women and all of his children and said, I know better than you. Well, he could have. He could have said it, but he wouldn't have got anywhere. Mental torture and bad karma. That's the message of Jacob Wetterling and Nathan Breeze for their homelands, Australia and the USA.